032, skydive, 032, skydive immediately. The base commander's voice kept coming from the earphones. Maybe the sound in the earphones was too loud, or maybe the vibration of the plane played a role. In short, Lei Tian, who had just been pulled by the 9G overload and almost fainted, became clear again in front of his eyes. However, the instrument panel in front of him is different from the fighter plane he just piloted. Originally, Lei Tian was an old industrial base in China, a test pilot of the Shenyang Aircraft Industry Group, the eldest son of the Republic, and the J-11 fighters newly manufactured by the company needed to be tested before they could be delivered to the troops. Today, when he was flying, he skillfully made various maneuvers to test the performance of the aircraft. However, when he was pulling a somersault, there was an accident, and the body's anti-G suit was not pressurized as usual. As a result, relying on flesh and blood, Lei Tian, who can resist 5G overload at most, fainted. Ordinary pilots can resist up to 4G overloads, and those who can resist 5Gs are test pilots. As for those who can resist 6Gs, they can select astronauts, but fighter jets can pull out. 8 or 9 overloads come from, and the rest of the overloads are all offset by the anti-G suit pressure. Lei Tian remembered what happened just now, but now, everything seems to have changed in front of him. The J-11 is a domestic model transformed by Shenfei on the basis of digesting and absorbing the Su-27. The display equipment inside has long been replaced by a liquid crystal display, which can display a variety of information. And now, the instrument panel in front of you is all instruments, only a circular cathode ray tube display, which seems to be a radar screen. The instrument panel is blue, with a cool feeling unique to metal, and all the markings on it are a special kind of letters, seems to be Russian. Only when the Su-27 was first introduced was it in Russian. The body was still tightly pressed against the seat by the overload, and Lei Tian felt the constant pressure on his legs to press his legs tightly, pressing back the blood in his lower part to prevent black vision. Is the anti-G suit working normally again? No. This is the high-altitude anti-G suit. Lei Tian felt the narrowness of his field of vision. He was not looking at the usual helmet goggles, nor did he have an oxygen mask. His entire head was in a closed helmet, and he could only see the outside through the front lens. Outside the cockpit, the field of vision is also quite narrow. The front windshield is 3-piece, without any rearward vision. This is an authentic second-generation aircraft. André, go skydiving. A roaring voice came from the earphones again. The height is still 500 meters. Go skydiving? André? Are you André? In an instant, countless memories flooded into Lei Tian's mind. Andrei Vladimirovich Tolstoy, born in Kyiv, his father was an engineer in a power station and his mother was a housewife. Andrei loved flying since he was a child, and then signed up for the Soviet Air Force, was selected all the way, and now he is a MiG-25 pilot. The MiG-25, the legendary fighter, is now proud to fly the MiG-25, the most advanced Soviet fighter in the Soviet Air Force and Defense Air Force. Damn, it's only 76 years. Yes, 1976. I have passed through. There are still 200 meters. If you don't go skydiving, you will just wait to fall into caviar in the Caspian Sea. The voice on the radio became even more anxious. Skydiving? Lei Tian, no. Andrei woke up suddenly, his plane was entering a terrible stall spin. The MiG-25, a high-altitude and high-speed fighter, has a particularly tall vertical tail in order to have good performance at high altitudes with thin air. Generally speaking, it is not easy to enter a stall spin, but it also means that once it enters a stall tail spin, it's not easy to fix it. This time, Andrei and the leader were in a two-plane formation to conduct flight training in the airspace south of the base. At an altitude of 10,000 meters, Andrei was pulling too much when he made a vertical climb and then dived down. As a result, it fell. In order to ensure the aerodynamic efficiency of the rudder surface under the thin air at high altitudes, the vertical tail of the MiG-25 is extraordinarily tall. However, at low altitudes, there will be the problem of excessive aerodynamic torque, which may even lead to flight accidents. If there is a telex operating system, it can be achieved by setting the same amount of poles in the computer, but unfortunately it is still a delusion in this era. The fuselage was spinning and falling vertically. Due to the lag of the anti-G suit, Andrei's eyes were instantly darkened, and then he slowly woke up, and he had already passed through. Skydiving? The Earth was approaching rapidly, and the altimeter on the dashboard in front of him was turning rapidly. Andrei knew that at this time, he absolutely could not parachute. Damn, the best chance to skydive has been missed. This is an old-fashioned Soviet aircraft, not the Su-27 of later generations. It uses the Star-like K-36 ejection seat. The MiG-25 is still installed in the KM-21 on the MiG-21 that has been used for more than 10 years. One ejection seat, the ejection envelope is limited, and now the height is too low. If you eject it, you have to fall into a paddy. Change it out, change it out. Andrei is a veteran pilot. In another world, he has flown more than 20 times of stall and spin recovery, and now in this world, although it is the first time for him. Encountered, but when I was learning, I already knew how to recover from the spin of the MiG-25. Reaching out his hand, Andrei quickly pushed the steering stick, shoved it in the opposite direction of the spin, followed by the rudder, and also moved in the opposite direction of the spin. No, it's not enough, the height is too low. Put down the landing gear, put down the parachute. Andrei freed up his left hand and quickly flipped a few switches. The Soviet Union's ergonomics were very poor. To put these things, he actually had to flip 5 switches. Andrei couldn't complain anymore. When he opened it quickly, a white snowflake vacated the tail. Only when the aircraft is in a test flight will it be equipped with a spinner. Even if the pilot cannot correct it, as long as the spinner is released, the spinner can help the aircraft return to normal. Now, this MiG-25 can only be used temporarily. The deceleration parachute acts as a spin parachute. At the same time, lowering the landing gear is also to increase the resistance. The Earth is rapidly approaching, and the altimeter is rapidly turning. After these actions are completed, the next thing Andrei can do is to meditate in his heart, God bless him. Almost when it was about to touch the ground, the fighter plane leveled. Huge steel fighter, a tamed beast. Sokolovka, 032 has been leveled. Andrei said on the radio, please continue training. 031, 032, return immediately. The voice of the base came from the earphones. There was a near-flight accident just now, and the base terminated the plan to continue training. After returning, we still need to conduct accident analysis. UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. This is the far east of the Soviet Union, Primorsky Krai. Across the sea is an island country. The warm sea breeze blows, and the entire area is covered with dense forests. The scenery is beautiful. In the distance, the Yuzulka River flows quietly. Thinking of the bad smog in the future and the chaotic sky all day, Andrei had a good impression of this place. Although he didn't know how to get through it, it seemed to be pretty good here. Already cruising at an altitude of 8,000 meters, Andrei looked out through the narrow goggles. Accustomed to the flying helmets of later generations, Andrei is very dissatisfied with the current helmets. The helmet of later generations is a half helmet, and the whole face is exposed. After putting on the oxygen mask, the goggles can be put down to cover the face. The current helmet is a full helmet. After putting it on, there is only a small space left in the front to look out. However, the MiG-25 is a fighter that can fly to an altitude of 30,000 meters. Even after adding weapons, it can easily jump to 25,000 kilometers, which is already the edge of space, so, you must wear this astronaut-like helmet and high-altitude compensation suit, otherwise, if the plane really crashes, it is ejected from an altitude of more than 20,000 meters, and the body's blood will immediately evaporate. However, the aircraft under the crotch is quite good. This is the pride of the Soviet military industry, the masterpiece of the Mikoyan Design Bureau, and the world's first fighter that can reach double 3. At an altitude of 30,000 meters, the speed of Mach 3. At the speed of Mach 3, the temperature of the surface of the aircraft will be as high as several hundred degrees, and the aluminum alloy of ordinary fighter jets will also melt at this temperature. Therefore, in order to manufacture such a high-speed aircraft, special materials must be used. The American solution is to use high-temperature resistant titanium alloy, which is both light and strong, while the Soviet Union's idea is to use stainless steel, which is common in the industry. Yes, this is a fighter made of stainless steel. This is definitely a heavy fighter, with an empty weight of 15 tons, a normal takeoff weight of 36 tons, and a fuselage of up to 16 tons of fuel. Although Andrei of later generations has never piloted such a fighter, but when he crossed over, he was dismantled by the MiG-25 and almost crashed. But now experiencing this powerful fighter born with simple and rough aesthetics, Andrei also has a faint excitement. 031, 032, heading 270, there is an unknown target in the number 14C area, go to intercept it immediately. Cruise at Mach 2.4. Originally, Andrei's fighter plane had malfunctioned and should no longer carry out this interception mission, but the two of them were in the right position and could quickly reach sea area number 14. Therefore, when the two returned, they received another call. Such a task. Received. The lead pilot Belenko replied, heading 270. Speed 2.4. Pressing the operating lever, the fighter plane drew an arc in the air and flew towards the direction of the ground guidance. For the Soviet Homeland Defense Air Force, the standard interception tactics were carried out under ground guidance. Andrei followed his lead plane, pressed the and turned, and at the same time turned on the engine at the rear to increase his speed. At this height, the air resistance is quite small, and the two engines at the rear emit fiery tail flames. When the afterburner is turned on, there is a feeling of pushing back that makes the secretion of adrenaline quicker. The R-15B300 engine, an afterburner thrust of 109 knots erupted, and the fuel was injected into the afterburner, turning into a high-temperature and high-pressure gas, which pushed the fighter to continue to accelerate. A cone-shaped airflow appeared at the front end of the fighter. Then, the front of the fighter pierced the airflow. With a gentle sonic boom, the fighter had entered supersonic cruise. On the green instrument panel, the pointer of the Mach watch is slowly turning, Mach 1.2, Mach 1.5, Mach 2, and finally, stable at Mach 2.4. Retracting the throttle a little, Andrei let the fighter fly steadily at the speed of Mach 2.4. The two MiG-25 fighter jets flew towards the target area of 200 km at a speed of Mach 2.4 at an altitude of 24,000 meters. This distance, for the MiG-25, only took 4 minutes. And ordinary fighters need at least 10 minutes, which is the advantage of interceptors. During the whole process, Andrei had not turned off the afterburner since takeoff, and had been in the state of afterburner flight. Ordinary fighters, such as the F-15 and other air superiority fighters, can only use afterburner during takeoff and aerial combat. The use of afterburner only accounts for less than 10% of its flight time. Do not use force for more than 3 minutes, otherwise the engine will be damaged. For pure interceptor fighters, take the current MiG-25 as an example. During combat takeoff, climbing, running to the theater, air combat, etc., the engine can be powered up to drive the aircraft. The use of afterburner is almost 50% of the entire flight time. Otherwise, if the MiG-25 can only fly at Mach 2 for a few minutes or more, it is of no practical significance. When the MiG-25 is flying at Mach 2.4, it can cruise indefinitely until the fuel runs out. UU read www.uugonshu.com and flying Mach 2.83 to 3.2 the engine may be scrapped, but not necessarily scrapped. Combat troops are allowed to fly Mach 2.6 for 15 minutes during training. Exceeding 2.83 must be approved by the regiment level, and only the best pilots will be approved to fly above Mach 3. However, using afterburner to fly requires a lot of fuel. In order to make the MiG-25 have a longer supersonic range, the Soviets did it by increasing the amount of fuel. The oil storage of the MiG-25 is as high as 16 tons. Taking off from the base and conducting flight training, they have always been in a subsonic state without turning on the afterburner. Now, after receiving the order, the remaining fuel in their fuselage has exceeded 12 tons. This fuel is enough. Support them to fly to the sea area number 14 in a supersonic cruise state, complete the interception mission, and then return in a subsonic state. Andrei's unit is stationed in the Far East, and its main task is to supervise the U.S. military in the island country across the sea, and conduct interception operations at any time. They have performed such tasks many times. Every time, it's just an expulsion, but this time, with Andrei coming through, it's bound to be unusual. The rapid flight causes the airframe to rub against the air. The cockpit cover must not be touched by hand at this time, otherwise the palm will be scalded. Although there is an air conditioning system in the cockpit, the temperature has risen to 50 degrees, which is definitely not a person. A comfortable temperature, and all the pilots who flew the MiG-25 fighters said it was acceptable. Aircraft are used for combat, not for pleasure. The Soviet Union, which never paid attention to ergonomics, would not think there was anything wrong with it. UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. How much fuel is consumed is not what Andrei cares about. In the basic data, the supersonic interception combat radius of the MiG-25 is definitely more than 500 kilometers, and the MiG-31 of later generations has reached more than 700 kilometers. The speed of sonic interception was only 200 kilometers. Under the guidance of CGI, when they reached the air above the predetermined target, the two MiG-25s began to descend. An aircraft that looks like a transport plane is flying over the Sea of Japan near the Soviet Union. The four propeller engines are constantly turning, the fuselage is covered with various antennas, and under the belly, there is a bulging thing, as if it is a woman's belly. It is flying at an altitude of 8,000 meters. Attention, you are close to the Soviet airspace ahead, so be vigilant. In the cockpit, Lieutenant Artius of the U.S. Air Force said, "All systems are turned on and signals are collected, and we will evacuate immediately." Following his orders, various electronic devices entered the working state, and various signals radiated from the distant shore were continuously passed through the antenna and entered into the device for preliminary collection and separation. Found the airborne radar wave, monopulse. An electronic officer said, "The power is very high, the Cyclone A radar. The Soviet MiG-25 is here." The United States attaches great importance to electronic intelligence. After the successful development of the Soviet MiG-25, the United States began to study the Soviet fighter, including the signal characteristics of the airborne radar, which has been well known by the United States, especially the current aircraft. It is a special electronic fighter. After comparison, the target of the attack was immediately determined. It was the airborne radar of the Soviet MiG-25. Cyclone A. Here comes the Soviet MiG-25. Immediately, everyone on the plane was a little worried. MiG-25. But the best Soviet interceptor is said to be able to fly to Mach 3. Until now, U.S. intelligence agencies have been deliberately studying the secrets of this fighter. Don't be afraid, we are flying on the high seas now, and we haven't entered the Soviet airspace. They can't do anything to us. Asius said, "We continue to carry out the mission. After this mission, we will have a month's vacation. Can go to Hawaii for vacation." During the Cold War, the contact between the two sides was very frequent. This was a mission. What if the Soviet MiG-25 came? The most is to fly up and down, lock one's own aircraft with radar, scare and frighten, and never dare to actually launch missiles. Now it is a Cold War. If you are not careful, if you miss the gun, it will trigger the Third World War. Ashes is very confident. "I don't know how many times this kind of thing has happened. What are you afraid of? They have important tasks. More than 100 kilometers to the west is the most important military port in the Soviet Far East, Vladivostok. In order to prevent electronic interception by the United States, the Soviets often changed the frequency of their electronic systems, and the United States responded by constantly collecting new electronic signals. This is just a routine mission. They're out." At this moment, the pilot shouted. In the sky, two MiGs suddenly swooped down from a high altitude, almost directly facing the plane, passing over the sky. In a flash, the red 5-point star on the tail was so dazzling. At the same time, at the moment of passing by, Andrei also saw the plane from his field of vision, and his eyes suddenly froze. American EP-3. The P-3 maritime patrol aircraft, nicknamed the Orion, is a 4-engine turboprop multipurpose maritime patrol aircraft developed by Lockheed for the U.S. Navy by improving the L-188 Electra regional airliner in the late 1950s. This patrol aircraft has a payload of 26 tons, a large fuselage, and a large number of electronic equipment inside the fuselage. At the same time, there are 10 weapon external storage points under the wings, and 8 internal bomb bays under the belly, which can carry AGM-65 air-to-ground missiles, AGM-84 anti-ship missiles, Mk-46/50 torpedoes and Mu-90 torpedoes, as well as depth charges, mines, etc. After this aircraft was developed, it was used by the United States to perform maritime tasks such as reconnaissance, anti-submarine, anti-surface, and surveillance patrols. The Americans have used this aircraft to approach and reconnaissance sensitive areas such as coastlines and exclusive economic zones of many other countries. On the basis of this patrol aircraft, the ALQ-110 Signal Collection System, ALD-8 Radio Directional Instrument, ALR-52 Automatic Frequency Measurement Receiver, and ALR-60 Multi-Channel Radio Communication Recording Device of the United Technology Laboratory are installed. And other equipment specially used for electronic reconnaissance, it has become a professional electronic reconnaissance aircraft, and it is also the vanguard of the American battlefield. In 1969, the first EP-3 joined the 1st Squadron of American Air Reconnaissance. Now, what Andrei and Belenko want to intercept is this American electronic reconnaissance plane. There is no equipment mounted under the belly of the aircraft. This aircraft is just a reconnaissance aircraft without weapons. It seems harmless to humans and animals, but it will have a serious impact on the Soviet Union's national defense and security by collecting electronic information. Although it is still on the high seas, for the Soviet Union, it is too close and must be expelled. 032, pay attention to surveillance. Belenko's voice came from the earphone, "I'll expel it." After the two fighter jets flew over the EP-3, they drew an arc in the air and flew over again. Seeing that the EP-3 had no fear, and was still flying there swaggeringly, Belenko, the captain, said immediately. 032 received. Andrei replied, retracting his thoughts. Andrei pulled up and followed behind. Belenko's MiG-25 fighter jet flew towards the EP-3. Damn Russians, what are they going to do? The American pilot steadied the plane, reading www.whenyougonshu.com just now, the MiG-25 flew over from behind, and the huge airflow disturbed the electronic reconnaissance plane. When the MiG-25 appeared overhead, he subconsciously pushed the lever. I almost made a roll of a fighter jet. In that case, the EP-3 would be disintegrated. The pilot gasped and cursed. "Don't be afraid, they don't dare to come for real." Asius said, "We will fly for another 3 minutes, and all the electronic data will be collected." "Damn it!" The pilot stabilized the plane, watching the MiG-25 in front of him, making a high overload maneuver, as if he were braking suddenly on the highway, and almost collided with the EP-3. Who said that the MiG-25 took care of high-altitude performance, resulting in poor low-altitude maneuverability? The heavy interceptor in front of me is almost as light as the F-16. Don't worry about him, let's continue flying. Ashes was very open. Of course the mobility is better now. The supersonic cruise just now consumed several tons of fuel. Originally, the thrust of the engine was quite large, and the self-weight was reduced again, which was quite flexible. As for the structural strength, is the structural strength of a stainless steel fighter plane still poor? Belenk made a variety of actions, but he couldn't drive the EP-3 away. The Americans seemed to have a brain. Are they really not afraid of knocking them down? Climbing up and leaving the EP-3, Belenko still thought gloomily in his heart. 031, 032 request for expulsion. Andrei's words sounded in the earphones. Yes. Belenko agreed. UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. Americans, here I come. For a moment, Andrei's eyes were full of madness, and the picture from that year appeared in his mind again. The American EP-3 was flying recklessly over the South China Sea, detecting electromagnetic signals from the mainland. The heroic and fearless naval aviation pilot Wang Wei, driving the long-outdated J-8II fighter, went with the captain to intercept them. During the confrontation, the American pilot maliciously approached Wang Wei's plane, and the huge EP-3 plane quickly rammed the rear fuselage of Wang Wei's J-8II plane. Before Wang Wei could react, the nose and left wing of the U.S. plane collided with the rear fuselage of Wang Wei's plane. The outer propeller of the left wing, like a chainsaw, smashed the vertical tail of Wang Wei's J-8II into pieces. This is a malicious collision incident. The hero Wang Wei's plane lost its vertical tail and could not continue to fly. In desperation, Wang Wei chose to skydive. Since then, he has never been found. The Republic has lost an excellent pilot, but Wang Wei's spirit is inspiring the Republic. All of them, including the pilots who fought against the sky. Lei Tian before crossing, although he was not a frontline combat unit, he still kept this shame in his heart. Now, encountering the American EP-3 again, Andrei's heart is naturally full of anger. It's okay to bully the old J-8II. Now, let you taste the power of Lao Tzu's stainless steel fighter. In this era, the pursuit of speed is endless. When the speed exceeds Mach 2.5, a problem called thermal barrier will follow. Due to friction with the air, a large amount of heat will be generated, which can be ignored when the speed is low. However, when the speed of Mach 3 is reached, the temperature of the nose will exceed 300 degrees. At this temperature, the aluminum alloy will be as soft as toilet paper, no need to say anything about maneuvering, and even normal flight cannot be guaranteed. In order to allow the aircraft to break through this restricted area, the United States and the Soviet Union have adopted their own methods. The Americans have used advanced titanium alloys to manufacture, and the SR-71 Blackbird, a reconnaissance aircraft, has been born. It is still quite limited and has almost no maneuverability, so it can only be used for reconnaissance and cannot be used for air combat. The Soviet Union adopted a simple and rude method, that is, stainless steel. According to the analysis of some brick houses, the stainless steel body of the MiG-25 is cumbersome. In order to reduce the weight, the structural strength of the body can only be sacrificed. Therefore, the MiG-25 cannot withstand high-value maneuvers, so the MiG-25 can only be used as an interceptor and the use of reconnaissance aircraft. This is completely on paper. The MiG-25 uses a stainless steel body, which is quite sturdy. Some pilots have pulled out an overload of 11.5 g, and the fighter is still very good. There are also bricklayers who say that the Soviet Union's titanium alloy technology was not enough at that time. In fact, the Soviet Union's Yavakin Design Bureau at that time, and the later Sukhoi Design Bureau, had already built a titanium alloy T4 verification machine. Titanium alloy technology it has already passed the test, but the Soviet Union chose stainless steel after comparison. The aluminum alloy J8II can't hit the EP3, but the stainless steel MiG-25 is different. The overall frame of the MiG-25 is made of stainless steel, and the tall vertical tail at the tail is also made of stainless steel. The two engines at the rear spewed flames, and Andrei was operating the MiG-25 fighter jet and flew towards the EP-3 quickly. At this point, the departure of EP-3 has entered the countdown. In another 30 seconds, all data collection is completed. Even if this mission is over, although there are terrible Soviet aircraft following, it seems that it has not done anything to itself. I just tossed it for so long, but it didn't work. Polar bears are not scary. They are also afraid of getting fired. With this kind of mentality, the Americans on the plane are no longer afraid. Instead, they are relaxed. After this mission is over, they can go to Hawaii for vacation. Find a beautiful woman and show off this action. 032, pay attention to the height. The voice of the lead plane came from the earphones. At this time, Belenko felt that something was wrong. Generally speaking, the planes that expelled the other side flew above the other side. After flying over the nose, they pressed the operating lever, just like other cars on the road, forcing the other side to turn and amusing them. But now, Andrei's fighter jet is lower than the opponent's. What happened to Andrei? The flight in the air is measured in seconds. Just after Belenko gave the order, Andrei's fighter plane had already flown to the rear and lower side of the EP-3. Then, under Belenko's gaze, Andrei's plane quickly flew under the opponent. Damn, it's so close, it's going to hit me. The MiG-25 does not have any rearward vision. When doing this action, Andrei can only rely on his own experience to drive. In order to have sufficient lateral control capability in thin high altitudes, the MiG-25 vertical tail is tall and has a double vertical tail layout. This is the world's first fighter with double vertical tails. The American F-15 fighter, the choice of aerodynamic shape, got a lot of inspiration from the MiG-25. And now, the advantage of this double vertical tail is that in case one vertical tail is injured, Andrei can also drive the fighter back. Andrei's plane flew quickly below the opponent's left side. In order to ensure the effect, when the opponent's wing passed over Andrei's head, Andrei deliberately pulled the control lever backwards. Andrei, press the lever, you're about to hit it. Belenko at the rear could see it clearly. Andrei's nose flew past, and the right vertical tail at the tail would be similar to the American EP-3. Collision. It's a pity that his reminder was too late. Just before his words were finished, the tall vertical tail on the right side of the MiG-25 had already passed the outer side of the left wing of the EP-3, near the number 1 engine. The sharp vertical tail, like a knife, cut off the outside of the left wing of the EP-3. The vertical tail continued forward, collided with the propeller, and sparks of metal flew. Andrei's first close contact with the American EP-3 ended like this. When Andrei pushed the accelerator and accelerated to leave, the EP-3 was already shaking like a leaf in the wind. Damn Soviet people, they're crazy. In the porthole of the main observation station on the port side of EP-3, the observer watched his wing was cut and fell off, and the number 1 engine propeller outside was sparking, and he couldn't help shouting, "Quick, shut down one. No engine, a piece of our wing was cut off." UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. The body of the EP-3 electronic reconnaissance aircraft is a normal layout, with a cantilevered lower wing and a traditional aluminum alloy structure. Drives a 54H6077 four-bladed constant-speed propeller. Because the engine power is sufficient, just like the bomber in the World War II era, one engine is often turned off when performing many tasks, which can save fuel and prolong the airborne time. If the weight of the aircraft, the weather, etc. are appropriate, even the external engine will shut off. Generally speaking, if the engine is turned off, the number 1 engine on the left side is selected, because this is the only one of the 4 P3 engines that does not have a generator, and there is no need to generate electricity for the electronic equipment on the machine. Without the exhaust, the EP3 added an observation window to the port side of the aircraft. Now, the observer on this EP3 saw a thrilling scene. The opponent's fighter plane actually cut off a piece of his own wing. If the engine is only cut, then after turning off the number 1 engine, the plane can still be controlled and continue to fly. However, now that the wing has been cut off, the situation is completely different. The lift provided by the left wing was insufficient, and the left side fell down suddenly, while the right side provided too much lift, which caused the right side to rise. In an instant, the huge EP3 fuselage turned obviously sideways. The pilot's eyes and hands were quick and he pressed the control panel to the right to get the plane right again. At this time, the altitude of the plane began to drop rapidly, with a high-frequency sound that cut through the air, making everyone in the cabin felt fear. Is it about to crash? Steady, fast! Ashes shouted loudly. Although he was the executive officer of this mission, he was not a pilot. Facing the sudden impact of the plane, he had no second chance except shouting. Method. The pilot tried hard to stabilize the control panel. The EP3 was still descending. If it continued like this, they would all have to enter the sea. Come in, baby! The pilot shouted, pulling the control panel back hard, and finally, at an altitude of 2,000 meters, the plane leveled off. Return, let's return immediately! Ashes shouted. From the cockpit here, he could see the MiG-25 flying past with majesty, and the red 5-point star on the vertical tail was so striking. No, our plane was hit and seriously damaged. We can only choose to make a forced landing, and we can't continue to fly for thousands of kilometers to return home. The pilot shouted loudly. A part of the left wing has fallen off. Although the plane is holding on now, it will not fly for long. The pilot can even imagine that as long as he makes a big angle of steering, the plane will definitely lose its balance and fall. Can only choose forced landing. However, if there is a forced landing, where can it be forced to land? This plane is not a seaplane. Only land forced landing. And the land near here belongs to the Soviets. No, you have to fly back. Asius regained his previous stubbornness. At this moment, a gust of crosswind blew, and suddenly, the whole body began to shake violently again, and everyone in the cabin exclaimed. When Asius just shook, his body fell on the seat, and his face turned pale. If he was forcibly ordered to go back, he would only crash in the middle of it. There was no other choice but to make a forced landing. Crash landing to where? There seems to be a Soviet military airport nearby, at least it must be on land first. Sitting in the MiG-25's cabin, looking out through the narrow field of vision, Belenko was speechless for a while. Andrei's action just now was definitely intentional. It's crazy to actually collide with the other party on the initiative, but the effect is not bad. Sokolovka, 032 call, 032 collided with the interceptor target. The interceptor target lost its ability to fly, and is falling into our airspace. Andrei called the base on the radio. Repeat, the intercepted target lost its ability to fly and is falling into our airspace. There was an anti-aircraft missile position in front of him, and Andrei was very worried that the American electronic reconnaissance plane would be beaten down by the anti-aircraft missile, and his hard work would be in vain. Continue to monitor, 032, report the damage to the plane. The voice of the ground came from the earphone. My plane is normal and can continue to fly. The interception target lost an engine and a wing. Andrei reported in the radio, visually, we made an emergency landing at our base. Belenko also flew a MiG-25 fighter jet and followed behind the American electronic reconnaissance plane, closely monitoring the other party's flight. From his side, he could see more clearly that the other party was flying crookedly and would crash at any time. Same. In the EP-3 electronic reconnaissance plane, the Americans are still worried about their lives. They have broken into the airspace of the Soviets. Will the Soviets shoot them down? You know, the Soviets' sense of sovereignty is quite high, and they dared to shoot down even a lost civil airliner, not to mention their real electronic reconnaissance aircraft. And, what are the consequences of this? Will it lead to a world war? He has already flown over the land, and he can see dense forests and villages in the distance. Their heights have fallen to 1,000 meters. Where is the place to land? Navigation equipment in the aircraft has been damaged, and now the target can only be found visually. Ahead, there is an airport ahead. Asius saw a straight runway in the distance and shouted to the pilot. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. There is indeed an airport in front. The pilot operated the plane and flew over staggeringly. He knew that he only had this chance. If missed, go round is almost impossible. Descend. The pilot pulled the control panel and wanted to descend along the standard glide line. Unfortunately, just as he moved, the plane was on the verge of losing control again and fell down like a big rock. There was screaming in the cabin, eyes closed, and someone started to draw a cross on their chest. Only the pilot is still working hard. The wheel has been put down, the aircraft is not aligned with the runway, the main landing gear has already contacted the ground, the left one touches the ground first, then bounces back, touches the ground again, and rolls for tens of meters before leaving the runway. Going down and sliding onto the grass next to it, the pilot pressed the rudder with both feet. In standard operation, the two rudders have become the brakes of the wheel, and the body continued to rush forward, almost before rushing into the nearby woods, and finally stopped. Down. This is an unforgettable landing. Stop, get off the plane. The pilot said, unfastening the seat belt, and about to run into the rear cabin. No, hurry up and destroy the electronic equipment on the plane. After narrowly escaped death, Asius still remembered his responsibilities. There are too many secrets on this plane. This is the most advanced electronic technology in the United States. Now in the hands of the Soviets will definitely dismantle this aircraft for research. Nothing is left for the Soviets. Unfortunately, as soon as Asius' voice fell, the Soviets' shouts came from outside, put down your weapons immediately and get out of the plane. Yu Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in Yu Reading. Mobile users, please read. 2 steel fighter jets, flying from a distance, accurately aimed at the runway and entered the landing route. 031, 032, pay attention to the posture, the stick should not be too large, the landing gear has been lowered. The voice of the guide of the conning tower constantly came from the earphone. Although it was the first time to operate this kind of high-altitude and high-speed MiG-25 fighter, he inherited all the wings and turned into Andrei's young man. He calmly pushed the control lever, and the fighter continued to slide down. In order to allow the fighter to have good control at high altitude, the MiG-25 used a full-motion horizontal tail and a tall double vertical tail for the first time, which led to excessive operating torque in dense low-altitude air, requiring more operators just handle it carefully. There is a very vivid metaphor in later generations. At a low altitude, this is a flying brick. When the wheel was in contact with the ground, a slight vibration came, and looking to the sides through the cockpit with the metal frame, everything on the ground was rapidly retreating. The landing gear in front also touched the ground. Since the parachute was released, Andrei could only start to lightly brake. A heavy interceptor like the MiG-25 needs a runway of more than 2 kilometers to land. It was almost at the end of the runway that the MiG-25 was stopped. From the ladder put up by the ground staff, Andrei stepped off the MiG-25 fighter jet, stood beside him, and scrutinized it carefully. This is a tall and majestic fighter jet. Andrei couldn't find a more apt description. The tough lines, the almost box-like body, and the two huge rectangular air intakes all showed the characteristics of the Soviet Union: simple, reliable, rough, and powerful. Standing next to him, he could feel his insignificance. Even when he was driving the J-11 in his previous life, Andrei had never felt this way. At the same time, another ground crew member set up a ladder at the vertical tail. The vertical tail was 2 stories high, and was glanced at by the ground crew. At this time, Andrei remembered that he used the vertical tail as a knife to cut open the American EP-3 reconnaissance plane. Was the vertical tail injured? How is it? Is it serious? Andrei asked. It doesn't matter, the skin is a little damaged, just drag it back to the hangar and weld it. The ground crew replied, it didn't hurt the VHF antenna inside. Just solder it. The front part of the vertical tail will also rub against the air to increase the temperature, so of course, stainless steel is also used. There is no need for riveting, just direct argon arc welding. Andrei couldn't help but think of the later generations. In order to reduce the weight of the aircraft, composite materials were used in a large area. If this thing is slightly damaged, the whole must be replaced. The current MiG-25 only needs to be welded. Just thinking about it, someone patted Andrei's back. Turning his head, the same young man in anti-G suit and holding a full helmet in his hand looked at him. He is burly, majestic, and powerful, with a broad face, but there is a hint of laziness in his eyes. Captain Belenko! Andrei shouted involuntarily. The person in front of him is the lead plane who just came back from the attack with him, Captain Belenko. He came from the Sarsk Pilot Training Center a year ago, and now he is here, that is, Khyogivka Air Defense Air Force 513 Acting Deputy Chief of the 3rd Air Brigade of the regiment. Partnering with Andrei has also happened in the last month. Let's go and report to the commander. Belenko said, Andrei, you were so bold in the sky just now, aren't you afraid of crashing? At that time, my hand trembled, and I made a mistake in judging the distance. Andrei said. This kind of thing can be big or small. If it is said that he deliberately hit it, there will be more trouble, so Andrei still thinks it is better to say that it was an operation error. Belenko didn't speak, and Andrei remembered that this captain usually speaks very little and is always taciturn. Sitting in the Kama's car that was driven by the ground crew, Andrei's eyes lit up just after walking for a while. In the distance, there was a big guy with 4 engines. The wing seems to be missing a piece. Why does it look so familiar? Isn't this the EP-3? The enemy's road is narrow, and he actually landed here? Andrei suddenly felt joy in his heart. Soldiers from the Sokolovka base of the brigade, wearing steel helmets and holding AK-74 rifles with short butts, were guarding next to the plane. At this time, the Americans inside were reluctantly walking out. Stop, go take a look. Andrei shouted. The ground service car stopped. Andrei jumped down and walked over there. Belenko, who was behind, shook his head. What's so good about this? The frustrated American got off the plane and was immediately escorted by soldiers with live ammunition, heading towards the building of the base. Yes, it was escorting. For the Soviet soldiers, it was these Americans who violated the airspace of the Soviet Union and drove the plane to their own base. If there were no orders from above, they would have beaten the plane down with missiles. Americans are the most hated enemy. With that in mind, they certainly don't like these Americans. Hurry up, hurry up. Seeing that they were walking slowly, a soldier swung his gun and slammed it on the back of the slowest American, a gun butt. The American staggered and took a few steps forward. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com happened to be in front of Andrei. Looking at the Soviet pilot who was still wearing anti-G suits, the American's eyes suddenly filled up. Anger. Russian, you hit our plane in the air, this is against the basic principles of international law. This guy is Asius, he saw that the Soviet pilot had just come off the plane, and he probably hit him. He shouted, our US government will never tolerate it. Looking at this American, Andrei's eyes instantly became sharp. You Americans, not the savior, nor the world police, come to our Soviet waters to make trouble, and this is your fate. This time I just cut you off. It's just the wing of the plane, if I meet you next time, I'll fly the plane, go over here, and cut off the guy in your crotch. As Andrei spoke, he gestured towards the crotch of Ashes, holding a sharp pilot knife in his hand. A chill spread throughout Ash's body. There was a burst of laughter around, and the soldiers at the base were amused by Andrei. At the most tense moment of the Cold War, Andrei was just as disgusted by the Americans. The Americans bowed their heads and left. Andrei looked at the backs of these guys, but the hero's name suddenly appeared in his mind. Wang Wei, the Chinese pilot who was hit by an American EP-3 and finally returned to the sea, was also a flying companion that Andrei admired before crossing. Now, he has avenged him in this way. Americans are not world hegemons. You can show off your power everywhere. The Red Soviet is the only superpower that can stand up to the United States. Yu Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in Yu Reading. Mobile users, please read. The air of the warm Pacific Ocean blows to the Primorsky territory. It belongs to a temperate oceanic climate. Except for some humidity, it is very suitable for human habitation. There are dense forests everywhere, and the air you breathe is so fresh. There was no bitter cold in the vast expanses of the Soviet Union, just the same tensions of the Cold War. As the Far East region of the Soviet Union, it is separated by the Sea of Japan, opposite Japan's Hokkaido, and to the southeast is Japan's Honshu. In this Cold War period, this is undoubtedly the front line. Conflicts may occur at any time, turning the Cold War into a hot war. In order to deal with the containment of NATO led by the United States, the Soviet Union developed a huge military strength. The southern part of Primorsky Krai is the most important port city in the Soviet Far East, Vladivostok. The main force of the Far Eastern Navy, the Pacific Fleet. The Sokolovka base in Kyoguyevka, a small town in the north, is stationed with the 513th Regiment of the Soviet Homeland Defense Air Force, all of which are the latest Soviet MiG-25 interceptors. Once the war breaks out, these interceptors will be the first time to dispatch, to fight. And now, like the interception of the American EP-3 electronic reconnaissance aircraft this time, it is completely the daily task of the Sokolovka base. It's just that the completion of this mission is simply too frustrating. In the office on the side of the command tower of the base, the commander of the base, Kozdub Dougraev, looked at the American EP-3 electronic reconnaissance plane that had landed in the grass far away from the runway of the base, and then looked at the MiG-25 plane that just landed, with impatience in his eyes. Kozdub, a Soviet ace pilot, fought in March 1943, and Germany surrendered in May 1945. During this period, he participated in 120 air battles, shot down 62 enemy planes, and was the number one ace of the Soviet Union. Unfortunately, this is not the commander of the base, Kozdub, it just has the same name. The commander of the base, Koryzhub, is 40 years old this year. During World War II, he was just a little boy. He graduated from aviation school at the age of 20 and flew MiG-15 fighters from the very beginning. He has been at this base all the time. 5 years ago, he was promoted to the commander of this base. Since then, he has been staying here. Arrogant, somewhat violent, and likes to be self-righteous. When someone hears his name and immediately reacts as the ace air combat hero, he will undeniably acquiesce and enjoy the feeling of admiration. Maybe it's a kind of morality that all the leaders of this era have, but they are still very caring for their subordinates, especially those who like to flatter him. The last time I went to Moscow, after the operation, he has been specially taken care of by the above. As long as there is no major incident, in a few months, there will be a vacancy in the Homeland and Air Defense Command in Moscow, and he will be promoted to Moscow. But now, they have been intercepted in turn and thrown into a big basket. Just intercepting an American electronic reconnaissance plane. Generally speaking, even if their own planes pass by, get a radar lock, accompany the flight or something, the Americans will retreat and leave. During the Korean War, Kozdubyu piloted a MiG-15 fighter plane and intercepted American planes many times. Although it was thrilling, he never missed a shot. Where is it like now? It actually collided with an American plane. Moreover, the American plane has also forced to land on its own base. Of course, Kozdubyu would not hide such a major event. When he received the report from the control tower, he immediately reported it to his superiors, and then saw the forced landing of the American plane in the control tower. And now, a large number of electronic experts are coming to the Sokolovka base, and the Sokolovka base will also become a powder keg, which will burn violently at any time. Of course, the Americans will not be reconciled to the forced landing of this electronic reconnaissance plane here, and they will definitely accuse it of a malicious collision of Soviet fighter planes. There will even be a massive firefight as a result. Report. At this moment, a voice came from outside. Come in. Kozdubyu shouted, his eyes fixed on the door. Two pilots who had just gotten off the plane and had not taken off their flight suits came in with their flight helmets. What's going on this time? Coach Hedub asked. Report. During the interception, the American pilot deliberately moved closer to our fighter plane, which led to the collision. Before Andrei could speak, Belenko had already spoken. After all, in this interception operation, Belenko was the captain, and he was also the acting captain of this aviation brigade. Reading www.uugonshu.com. Andrei was a little surprised by Belenko's answer. This guy is quite witty. It turned out that the Americans did it on their own initiative. Korajib already has a plan in mind, and this report must be written like this. It's all the result of the Americans' deliberate provocation. If a serious conflict really breaks out because of this, it has nothing to do with me. Report. The American reconnaissance plane landed here, the Americans may take action, we must take precautions. Andrei said, they may have a large group of aircraft coming over to put pressure on us. This superior has already given instructions that the entire base should enter the first-level combat readiness. Kozdubyu said. Yes, then we will immediately enter the first-level combat readiness. Andrei said. Andrei, your plane has been hit and had a stall and spin before, and it must be overhauled. Belenko, your plane's engine is about to be overhauled, and it's time to replace the engine. Dubyu said, this time, you don't have to participate in the first-level combat readiness. Coach Hedub is very worried about Andrei. This time, the first-level combat readiness is even easier to miss. It is better not to let Andrei participate. Andrei wanted to fight, but Belenko patted him and led him out. Damn it, my plane is all right, I just need to weld it. What happened to the commander? Andrei complained. Andrei, don't you know the character of the commander yet? Belenko said, think about how to write your flight report. However, it was really fun that you did this today. Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in Reading. Mobile users, please read. No matter what country you are in, flying is a noble profession, and pilots are paid the highest. In the Soviet Union, KGB personnel had the most status among the people, and they were soldiers. As Sokolovka at the forefront of the Cold War, the pilots of the entire base lived in an upstairs specially built for them, with 24-hour hot water supply, a single room for 2 people, a separate bathroom, and a house. There is also a TV. He took off his anti-G suit from the pilot duty room below the tower, changed into his own, and the two walked towards the dormitory. Pushing open the door of the dormitory, Andrei hurriedly went to the bathroom first. Just inside the bathroom, he smelled a strong smell of alcohol. Pushing open the door of the bathroom, he saw a tall Belenko sitting on the table beside the window, pouring a bottle into a wine glass, and the strong smell of alcohol filled the entire room. "Captain Belenko, are you drinking alcohol?" Andrei was shocked. This guy is usually very addicted to alcohol, but now, when he has no more alcohol to drink, he actually stole alcohol and mixed it with water to drink it. This is industrial alcohol. It is not brewed from grain, but is manufactured by industrial methods. It contains a small amount of methanol. Drinking it will make you blind. In this base, it is very easy to get industrial alcohol, because the MiG-25 is drinking. The MiG-25 engine needs a large flow of air, but the air intake is too large, and the wind resistance will also increase. In order to increase the intake air density, it is necessary to reduce the intake air temperature, so that the intake air volume can be increased. The MiG-25 has a showerhead-like water jet in the air intake to cool the air and increase its density. This is also a lot of pure water, but a mixed solution of water and ethanol. Ethanol can enhance the volatility of the solution and enhance the effect. Therefore, in addition to carrying a huge amount of fuel, the MiG-25 also carried a 250-liter water tank containing a mixed solution of water and ethanol. The vodka near the base is all sold out. Belenko said, "I got this alcohol. Come, have a drink." Andrei shook his head. Most Soviet people like to drink heavily. After drinking, they like to beat their wives. The base is already at the first level of combat readiness, and battles will break out at any time. Andrei said, "I want to keep a clear head." "Andrei, don't be too sober here, it's best to be confused." Belenko said, "I didn't expect that it would be the same in the frontline troops. It's the same as in the flight test center. There is a pure land. By the way, the flight report, you can read and write it." Belenko was very worried and was quite dissatisfied with the status quo. Looking at this guy who was drinking, Andrei knew what he was depressed about. It is no longer just after the Great Patriotic War, the whole country is full of positive and optimistic atmosphere. At this time, the Soviet Union has reached 76 years, and it seems to be quite powerful. In the competition with the United States, it has the upper hand, and Brezhnev is even more aggressive. However, the drawbacks of the Soviet Union at this time have begun to show. Severe bureaucracy and the formation of interest groups, especially Brezhnev's tenure system for cadres, turned the Soviet Union into a country ruled by the elderly, without the slightest vitality. In the future, the huge Red Empire collapsed. Of course, Andrei knew all of this. If he was reborn and became the General Secretary of a republic, or a high-ranking official in Moscow, he might have the ability to change all of this, but now, he is just a low-level pilot. Only 15 years until the collapse of the Soviet Union. Andrei, who was full of thoughts, watched Belenko drinking industrial alcohol and water cup after cup, and quickly said, "Captain Belenko, stop drinking that alcohol, I invite you to go out for a drink." "Go out for a drink?" Belenko said, "There is no more alcohol near the base. Let's go to the bar." Andrei said, "I know there is a bar in the town of Kyogivka, let's go there and have a good drink." "Bar?" Hearing Andrei's words, Belenko put down the cup that was being filled with water. The cup just poured was too little water and too much alcohol, making it very spicy to drink. "Okay, let's go have a drink." "But, Andrei, I remember you didn't drink before." Kyoguyevka is an ordinary town in the Far East without heavy industry. The residents of the town are mainly engaged in agricultural production in collective farms. There are low-rise bungalows everywhere. Only when you reach the center of the town, you can see 2 or 3. It's just a floor building, and the signs of the sickle and the axe can be seen everywhere. In fact, this place used to be just a small village. After the Sokolovka base was established, it gradually became prosperous. Another main task of the town was to ensure the personnel consumption of the officers and soldiers in the Sokolovka base. In the planned economy of the Soviet Union, it seems a bit redundant to mention consumption. In the base, there are pilots and ground crews, and even underwear is distributed uniformly. However, after all, people not only meet the basic needs of life, but also have material and spiritual needs. Kyoguyevka has a movie theater, shops, theaters, bookstores, and bars. Soviet men all love to drink, which is also a basic necessities for people living in cold regions. An open-top GAZ-69 car stopped at the entrance of the bar in the center of the town. Andrei and Belenko jumped out of the car. Just when he stepped on the steps of the bar, Belenko suddenly stopped. On the street ahead, a girl walked by. The black camisole is convex and concave. The chest is so full that it almost bursts the camisole. The lower body is a pair of trousers that are almost as short as the bottom of the thigh, and the bare calf is so sexy. Wearing high-waisted boots underneath, just looking at this body, it is simply a stunner in the world. And looking at the face again, reading www.yuyugonshu.com is even more exquisite, making people sigh the grace of the creator. Under the long eyelashes, those big eyes seem to be able to talk, the high nose bridge, the small mouth, her hair that was permed into wavy curls, draped behind her, smiled and frowned, as if she was a goddess who did not eat fireworks, with a noble and beautiful temperament. As long as it is a man, seeing a beautiful girl, the first image is like this. Andrei couldn't help but take a few more glances. In later generations, his aesthetic concept is still the standard of Huaxia. Now it seems that Mazi's girl also has a unique charm. Hey! Before they could get to the two of them, the girl suddenly called out. A boot under her feet, with a heel a few centimeters high, got stuck in a hole in the iron cover of the sewer. This bowing was just fine. Along the neckline of the camisole, I saw 2 meat swaying inside. In her hand, the handbag she was carrying just flew out and landed at Andrei's feet. Before Andrei could move, Belenko, who was next to him, quickly picked up his bag, ran 2 steps, and supported the girl. "Comrade, do you need help with your bag?" The girl turned to Belenko and showed a grateful smile. "My foot seems to be twisted. Could you please unzip my boots and let me stretch out my feet?" Belenko bent down, his hands seemed to tremble a little, and in front of him was the white flowered calf. Belenko slowly unzipped the girl's boots. "Come on, doesn't this guy have a wife and children? Why is his current performance like a 10,000-year-old who usually only masturbates to the cartoons of the island country, but suddenly faces the goddess in his heart?" UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. Inside the boots were the legs wearing black stockings. The stockings were taken off, and the ankles inside were a little red. "It's nothing, it's just a twist, just rest for a few days." Just as Andrei was about to speak, he heard Belenko say, "Comrade, where do you live? I'll send you back. Your foot is injured and you can't move too much. Send it back?" Women and alcohol, it seems that women are more lethal. Looking at Belenko's red face, Andrei knew that this guy turned out to be a sullen guy. When it comes to women, it's like a boar in heat. "It's okay, I'll stay at the hotel opposite." The girl said, "I can go back by myself." "How about that? I have a car here, get in the car." Belenko said, pointing to the open-top GAZ-69. The girl glanced at the car and finally nodded. Smelling the alcohol in Belenko's mouth, Andrei knew that he still had to be a driver, got into the car, Andrei started the fire, and Belenko in the back seat began to communicate with the girl. Comrade, how do you stay in a hotel? What about your family? I am a geography student at the University of Berlin. I am a senior this year. I like it here, so I chose to go to the Far East for an internship. I came a week early and was bored in Vladivostok. Come and walk around, the girl said. It turned out to be a college student. Still from the University of Berlin, which is an institution of higher learning, Belenko was immediately more interested. Okay, there are many interesting places in the far east of the Soviet Union. I can show you around. My name is Annie. The girl said, you can just call me by my name. You don't need to call me gay. Comrade, this name that can be heard everywhere in the Soviet Union is called the girl in front of you, which is a little inappropriate. When I heard the girl's words, Belenko immediately followed. Annie, my name is Belenko, and I am a soldier in the Soviet Union now. Soldier? Annie's eyes were full of curiosity. You are here, you are still a soldier, you won't be from the Air Force, right? At this moment, a roar sounded overhead, and a MiG-25 flew from a high place. Belenko looked at the girl seriously. It's not the Air Force, it's the Air Defense Force. Actually, I'm the pilot of the MiG-25. Crackling. At this moment, Andrei, who was in front of him, stepped on the brakes ignorantly. Student Annie, the hotel is here. Watching the girl limping upstairs, Andrei said, Comrade Captain, do you want to go up with me? Comrade Captain. Andrei raised his voice. Let's go to the bar. Back in the car, Belenko took one last look reluctantly and said. The bar is very clean. The wood is directly taken from the mountains outside. After splitting, the bar is made with the grain of the wood. A bearded owner in his 40s watched the two of them sit on it. What do you want? 2 bottles of vodka. Facing the cup that the boss took out, Belenko pushed it with his hand, took the bottle, bit off the cap, raised his head, and blew a few sips at the bottle. Vodka, this is a spirit. In addition to the aroma of the wine, it was spicy, and when I poured it into it suddenly, my stomach burned like fire. Anyone who is a soldier can drink it, and Andrei before the crossing can also drink, but the vodka is still too strong, and after just one sip, Andrei can feel the gas spewing out of his nose is spicy of. Andrei, do you know? You are the first person in the regiment to invite me to drink. After a few sips of alcohol, Belenko finally began to nag. In the Soviet Union, wine was a must for every man. It was common for men to drink together. Now, Belenko actually said that this was the first time someone invited him to drink. I was in the original army, because I talked back to my boss and was sent for a psychiatric evaluation. After I came here, no one wanted to communicate with me. Andrei, you know? I hate all this. My wife, originally, I came to Kyogivka with me, but I disliked the remoteness here and asked me for a divorce every day. 2 months ago, I took my son Kimka and went back to Moscow. I think my life is meaningless under the current system, but I have no power to change or overthrow this system. I have no home, I haven't heard from my mother for 25 years, and it's been 8 years I haven't seen my father, and now my relationship with Ludmila is cut off. My son Kimka, even if I see him a few times in my life, will be a complete stranger to me. I'm looking for a new way of life. Andrei suddenly found that his eyelids began to jump wildly, and he finally remembered who the guy in front of him was. Viktor Ivanovich Belenko, the famous guy in history, however, is notorious because he flew the pride of the Soviets, the MiG-25 fighter jet, to the island country and gave it to him. American. Before he defected, Americans were in awe of the Soviet MiG-25. UU reading www.uugonshu.com believed that the Soviet Union used various high-tech means to build a top-secret fighter made of titanium alloys, but after real contact, it was only discovered that this was a low-quality fighter made of stainless steel. In the eyes of the Americans, this kind of aircraft has no secrets. In the Soviet Union, all IFFs had to be replaced. At the same time, the fighter jets that terrified the West had no deterrent power. The serious consequences of this incident cannot be overstated. Absolutely can't let Belenko defect. You have to stop this from happening. Although the current system of the Soviet Union has various problems, this country is still the motherland of the Soviets. Defection is unforgivable for any reason. At this moment, Andrei wanted to return to the army immediately and report Belenko's rebellion to his superiors, but after thinking about it again, he stopped. Although Andrei was sure that Belenko would defect, but just relying on this drunken nonsense was not convincing, and Belenko would also feel extremely wronged. How could Belenko admit it before it became a fait accompli? When I report it now, the most I can do is to wait for Belenko to sober up, and then go to the commander and even the KGB's agents to bombard each other with each other. It seems that we have to think of a different way. Island country, 45 kilometers west of Tokyo, Fusa town, Tama County. Over here, the stars and stripes of the United States fluttered. As a victorious country, the United States entered the island country arrogantly, realizing the purpose of garrisoning troops in the island country and checking and balancing the Soviet Union and China. The headquarters of the 5th Air Force is located at Yokota Base. UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read. The 5th Air Force is one of the 4 air forces under the U.S. Pacific Air Forces Command. Formerly known as the U.S. Army Air Forces in the Philippines Command, established in August 1941, it was renamed the U.S. Air Force in the Far East in October. In January 1942, the 5th Air Force of the Army was established on this basis, and the first commander, Major General Breton. When the Icelanders provoked the Pacific War, this aviation unit participated in various wars, such as the Marshall Islands, New Guinea, Palau, Mariana, and Philippine Islands. U.S. Air Force in the Far East. In July 1945, he was stationed in the island country of Okinawa and participated in the support for the landing operation on the island country. After the Korean War broke out, this Air Force participated in the Korean War and fought many times with Hwaxia's volunteer army. After the smoke of the Korean War had cleared, the 5th Air Force was still stationed in the island country. This Air Force has 3 wing groups under its jurisdiction. Among them, the 18th Wing is stationed at Kadena Base in Okinawa, the 35th Fighter Wing is stationed in the island country of Misawa, the 374th Airlift Wing is stationed in the island country of Yokota. In later generations, in order to contain the emerging Hwaxia, the main force of the 5th Air Force was deployed in Okinawa to prevent the force of Hwaxia from breaking through the first island chain. Now, at the height of the Cold War, the main force of the 5th Air Force is all deployed in Misawa, guarding against the invasion of polar bears. The headquarters of the 5th Air Force is located in Yokota. At this time, the commander of the 5th Air Force, Lieutenant General Paul James, who is also the commander of the U.S. military stationed in Japan, is frowning. One of our own EP-3 electronic reconnaissance aircraft encountered 2 Soviet MiG-25 fighter jets in the northern sea of Japan, near Vladivostok. The reconnaissance plane was badly damaged and had to make an emergency landing at the Soviet air base near Chigivka. When receiving this news, Lieutenant General Paul slammed a punch on the table. Damn! Are the flight crew on the plane all fools? Even if it is forced to land at sea, it is better than forced landing in a Soviet base. If it is forced to land at sea, both the Air Force and the Navy of their own can quickly dispatch to rescue the people in distress. However, in the hands of the Soviets, the situation is different. Now, it's already dark, and the day is over, but my side has been silent and did nothing. Well. At this moment, the phone on the table rang. Paul picked up the phone, and there was a voice from the other side of the ocean, "Lieutenant General Paul, the diplomatic progress is not good. The President ordered to put pressure on the Soviet Union from tomorrow. Be careful, don't take the initiative to fire. Put pressure on the Soviet Union. Now is the peak of the Cold War. Any carelessness may lead to a world war." Therefore, after receiving the news that the EP-3 was hit, Lieutenant General Paul did not order the attack immediately, but was waiting for the order, and now, with the President's order, Paul can finally start action. On the one hand, there is diplomatic pressure to make the Soviets hand over the planes and personnel as soon as possible, and on the other hand, it is military pressure. Yes. Paul put down the phone and gave his order, "Misawa Base, make preparations before the war, and the large fleet will take off immediately from tomorrow, Plan No. 3. The third plan. The biggest threat to the US military stationed in Japan is the Soviet Union. In order to deal with the Soviet Union, the US military stationed in Japan has already formulated various plans. The current Plan No. 3 is a plan to deter the Soviet Union's Vladivostok area. After the President's authorization, the war machine of the US military stationed in Japan quickly started. 644 kilometers northeast of Tokyo, Misawa City, Aomori Prefecture, the northern tip of Honshu Island, Misawa Base. It was originally just a remote and backward village. Before World War II, the Icelanders built coastal railways and set up stations here, and Sans began to move towards modern civilization. Later, the island nation's navy built a military base here, and gradually developed into the northern part of the island nation. Military town. After World War II, the United States established the Misawa base here. Due to its suitable geographical location, it became the most important military base for the United States to check and balance the Soviet Union's Far East. It is also a military base for reconnaissance of Soviet electronic intelligence. EP-3 took off from here. In the hangar, the fighter planes are undergoing maintenance before the attack. The pointed nose droops a little, and behind it is a tandem two-seater cabin. The huge air intakes on both sides extend almost all the way to the rear, turning into two chrysanthemums. Above the chrysanthemums, the rear wing extends out. Especially the horizontal tails on both sides, which are folded down, and the vertical tail is surprisingly wide, which does not look like any beauty, but looks like a clown. Even the Americans felt that this fighter was not very beautiful, so they gave it the nickname of a ghost. This kind of fighter is the main force of the second-generation fighter in the United States, the F-4 Phantom. First of all, it was designed as a carrier-based aircraft. Therefore, all fighter aircraft are Tuza. Later, the U.S. Air Force felt that it was good and equipped a lot of them, becoming a famous second-generation aircraft in the United States. At this time, the third-generation aircraft of the U.S. Air Force are still in their early stages, and the F-15, which has been flamboyant in later generations, has just delivered the first few aircraft to the U.S. Air Force. It is impossible to equip the U.S. military in Japan, and the F-16 with the largest output, the fighter, the prototype has not yet been tested, and it is still early to equip the troops. The main force of the U.S. Air Force is these F-4 fighters. Now, these fighter planes belong to the 13th Fighter Squadron of the 35th Fighter Wing of the U.S. 5th Air Force at Misawa Base. All F-4 fighters are preparing for dispatch. The car moves the missile back and forth. According to the air superiority method, 4 AIM-7 Sparrow missiles in a sub-fuel tank will be mounted under the belly, and 4 AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles will be mounted on the wings on both sides, which is also standard air combat mount. The entire base was mobilized, and the flight preparation room was also brightly lit. The American pilots were conducting tactical analysis and preparing for the sortie tomorrow morning. The pilots have high fighting spirit. They all know that an EP-3 electronic reconnaissance plane that took off from this base was coerced by the Soviet aircraft and flew to the Soviet air base. This filled them with righteous indignation. At the height of the Cold War, they were extremely disgusted with the Soviets. In their eyes, the Soviets were the devils from the Arctic. Attention, we have to put maximum pressure on the Soviets, but we can't open fire first. The regiment commander said to his subordinates. UU Reading welcomes all book lovers to come and read. The latest, fastest, and most popular serial works are all available in UU Reading. Mobile users, please read.